every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. The world is full of different kinds of silence. There is the heavy, expectant silence of a concert hall moments before the first note is struck. There is the peaceful, insulating silence of a forest after a fresh snowfall. And then there is the silence of a wound. A silence that speaks not of peace, but of violation. It is the silence that greets you in the Dutch room of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. On a wall covered in rich, dark fabric, between masterworks by the greatest painters in history, hang two empty frames. They are gilded and ornate, perfectly lit, but they hold nothing. They are placeholders for ghosts. They are memorials to an absence. This is not the silence of reverence. It is the sound of a theft that has never been solved, a cultural wound that has never healed. It is the sound of $500 million in priceless art vanished into the ether. On the night of March 17, 1990, Boston was a city roaring with life. The streets of the Fenway neighborhood, normally quiet and academic, were alive with the final boisterous echoes of St. Patrick's Day. Inside the walls of the Gardner Museum, a Venetian-style palace, built to one woman's eccentric and exacting vision, a different world existed. It was a sanctuary of quiet contemplation, where 3 floors of galleries were packed with thousands of objects, from ancient Roman sculptures to Renaissance tapestries, all arranged not by period or artist, but by the personal, unchangeable whim of the woman who collected them, Isabella Stewart Gardner herself. Her last will and testament was the museum's central nervous system and its greatest vulnerability. The collection had to remain exactly as she had left it. Nothing could be added, nothing could be sold, and nothing could be moved. If even one piece were to be permanently displaced, her will dictated that the entire museum and its contents were to be auctioned off, its legacy dissolved forever. In the early hours of March 18th, as the last of the city's celebrations died down, 2 men would exploit that rigid, unchanging world. They would walk through its doors, and over the course of 81 minutes, they would perform a bizarre and brazen act of cultural butchery. They would take 13 works, among them a Vermeer, 3 Rembrandts, and a Manet, and then disappear, leaving behind a mystery that has confounded the FBI, tantalized the criminal underworld, and captivated the public for over 3 decades. This is the story of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist, but to call it just a story of theft is to miss the point. It is a story of contradictions, of meticulous planning, paired with baffling clumsiness, of immense value and senseless destruction. It is a puzzle, whose missing pieces are themselves masterpieces. Today, we will not simply recount the events of that night. We will dissect the anatomy of an echo, the story of a crime defined not by what was left behind, but by the colossal, deafening silence of what was taken away. To understand the crime, you must first understand the stage on which it was set. The Gardner Museum is not like other museums. It is a house, a preserved moment in time. Isabella Stewart Gardner, or Mrs. Jack as she was known, was a titan of Boston society in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. She was flamboyant, intelligent, and possessed of an insatiable appetite for art and a fortune to match. After her husband's death, she dedicated her life to creating a museum for her collection, a Venetian palace on the Boston Fens. She was intimately involved in every detail of its construction, and when it was finished, she personally arranged every single object in every gallery. A Spanish altarpiece might hang next to a modern American portrait. A simple wooden chair might sit beneath a priceless Italian tapestry. Each room was a complete composition, a work of art in itself. Her will was an extension of this philosophy. It was an attempt to freeze time, to preserve her vision for eternity. But in doing so, it also created an institution that was, by 1990, something of a relic, while other museums were upgrading to state-of-the-art security systems with pressure plates, infrared beams, and round-the-clock professional guard services. The Gardner was lagging behind. Its security was a patchwork of old and new. There were motion detectors, and a button at the security desk could summon Boston police, but the system relied heavily on the people manning that desk, particularly on the overnight shift. And on the night of March 17, 1990, the two people on duty were hardly seasoned security professionals. The first was 23-year-old Rick Abath. By all accounts, Abath was a character. He was a member of a local rock band, a night owl, who found the quiet, solitary hours of the museum guard shift conducive to his lifestyle. He was known to be a bit of a slacker, sometimes showing up for his shift inebriated or high. He had been reprimanded for it before. He was intelligent, but lacked discipline, a young man drifting through a job that many considered little more than a placeholder. His partner for the evening was 25-year-old Randy Heston, a newer guard with even less experience. This was only his second time working the overnight shift at the Gardner. The evening began uneventfully. The museum closed to the public, the day staff left, and Abath and Heston settled in for their 8th watch. Their duties were simple: monitor the video cameras from the central security desk and conduct 2 patrols of the galleries each night. The atmosphere was quiet, almost tomb-like. The only sounds were the hum of the ventilation and the occasional creak of the old building. At approximately 12:30 a.m. on March 18th, the fire alarm system began to go off in several zones of the museum. Abath, at the desk, saw the panel light up. He investigated the zones on his monitors, saw nothing, and, believing it to be a common glitch, shut the system off. A short time later, around 1 a.m., motion detector records later showed that the museum's side door on Palace Road opened and then closed. This was a direct and serious breach of protocol. The door was supposed to remain locked at all times. When questioned later, Abath would claim he couldn't remember why he did this, perhaps suggesting he was doing a quick security round. But the action hangs in the air, a question mark hovering over the very beginning of the timeline. 24 minutes later, at 1:24 a.m., a buzzer sounded at that same Palace Road entrance. Abath looked at the monitor and saw 2 men standing outside. They were dressed in what appeared to be police uniforms, complete with hats and coats. One had a thick, bushy mustache. Abath spoke to them through the intercom. The man with the mustache did the talking. He said they were police, and they were responding to a report of a disturbance in the courtyard. Here was the first critical moment, the first link in a chain of catastrophic failures. Museum protocol was crystal clear. Under no circumstances were guards to open the door for anyone, including police, without first verifying their identity and getting authorization from a superior. Boston police could be called by the guard, but they were not to be let in on their own say-so. Abath, a 23-year-old musician on a quiet night, looked at the uniforms, heard the authoritative voice, and made a decision that would alter the course of art history. He buzzed them in. The 2 men entered the museum. They approached the security desk where Abath was sitting. For a few moments everything seemed normal, if slightly tense. The men claimed to have recognized Abath, suggesting there might be a warrant out for his arrest. They asked him to step away from the desk, away from the silent panic button that would have instantly alerted the real police. Abath complied. He was told to face the wall, and suddenly he felt the cold click of handcuffs around his wrists. The ruse was over. The authority they projected was a performance, and Abath was its first captive audience. They asked him if anyone else was in the museum. Abath, now realizing the gravity of his mistake, told them about his partner Randy Heston, who was on his patrol. Using the museum's intercom, one of the thieves called Heston back to the security desk. When Heston arrived and saw his partner in cuffs, he too was quickly subdued. What happened next demonstrates a chilling level of preparation. The thieves were not just brutish thugs. They understood the psychology of control. They did not beat the guards. They spoke to them calmly. They assured them that if they remained quiet, they would not be harmed. To further cement their control, one of them turned to Abath and said, "You're not going to get paid enough to get hurt." They seemed to understand the mindset of a low-wage night watchman. They took the guards' wallets, examined their IDs, and told them they now knew where they lived. It was a clear, unspoken threat. Then they covered the guards' eyes and mouths with duct tape and led them down into the museum's basement. They were taken to separate areas, far from each other, and handcuffed to pipes. Their captors checked that the cuffs were not too tight, a strange, almost considerate gesture in the midst of a felony. Then they told the guards, "We're going to go take a look around." The thieves went back upstairs, and the guards were left in the cold, dark silence of the basement, listening to the muffled sounds of their footsteps overhead. Upstairs, the museum was now their private treasure chest, and for the next hour and 17 minutes they would move through it with a strange combination of purpose and bewilderment. The motion detector data, recovered by the FBI, provides a ghostly, minute-by-minute map of their movements, a silent ballet of theft. Their first target was the Dutch Room, a gallery on the second floor that housed some of the museum's most prized possessions. This room alone would become the epicenter of the crime. At 1:48 a.m., their presence trips the motion detector. They are in the heart of the collection. One of them approaches Rembrandt's 1633 masterpiece, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. It is the artist's only known seascape, a dramatic, churning canvas filled with terror and hope, as a wave crashes over a small boat carrying Jesus and his disciples. The painting is large, and it's secured to the wall. The thieves don't bother with delicate tools. They take a blade and crudely slice the canvas from its stretcher bars, the sound of tearing fabric echoing in the silent gallery. They roll it up. They do the same to another Rembrandt, A Lady and Gentleman in Black, a formal, somber portrait from 1633. Again, the canvas is cut away. Next, they turn their attention to a much smaller, far less famous work hanging nearby. A tiny postage stamp-sized self-portrait etching by Rembrandt, no bigger than a credit card. It's an odd choice, given the masterpieces surrounding it. Then they move to the most valuable piece in the room, and perhaps in the entire museum. Johannes Vermeer's The Concert. There are only about 34 authenticated Vermeer paintings in the entire world. To own one is to possess a treasure beyond measure. The Concert is a sublime, quiet scene of two women and a man playing music in a sunlit room. It is a masterpiece of light and harmony, valued at the time at over $200 million. Unlike the Rembrandts, this painting was on a wood panel. It couldn't be rolled. The thieves carefully remove it from the wall, taking the entire work, frame and all. Nearby hangs a painting by Govert Flinck, a pupil of Rembrandt. Landscape with an obelisk is also taken. Then, one of the most puzzling choices of the night occurs. They smashed the glass of a display cabinet to get to a Shang Dynasty bronze beaker, known as a GU. This ancient Chinese artifact, thousands of years old, is valuable, but its selection seems random, an afterthought. Their work in the Dutch room is done. They have been there for roughly 30 minutes. They then move to the short gallery, a long, narrow space on the same floor. Here, they take 5 drawings by the French Impressionist Edgar Degas, sketches of horses and jockeys. They also attempt to remove a large Napoleonic flag from the wall, but find the frame is too difficult to open. They abandon the effort, leaving the flag behind. Instead, they unscrew the stylized bronze eagle finial that sat atop the flagpole. It is another bizarre choice, an ornamental piece of metal, taken while masterpieces worth tens of millions were left untouched just a few feet away. Their final stop is on the first floor, in the Blue Room. There they take Edward Manet's Chez Tortoni, a small, vibrant painting of a man sitting at a cafe table. It was hanging on a wall near the gallery's exit. The thieves' path is as significant for what they ignored as for what they took. In the Raphael room, they walked right past Titian's The Rape of Europa, arguably the most valuable painting in the entire museum, a work so significant that Mrs. Gardner had built the room specifically to house it. They ignored works by Raphael, Botticelli, and Michelangelo. Their choices seemed inconsistent. They were bold enough to target a Vermeer, yet they took a worthless eagle finial. They were destructive enough to slice Rembrandts from their frames, but they carefully handled the Vermeer. It suggested a mission that was either guided by a very specific, eccentric shopping list, or executed by men who were not art experts, who were perhaps working from memory or photographs, grabbing what they could identify. At 2:41 a.m., the motion detectors show the thieves making 2 separate trips to the car, presumably loading their haul. Before they leave, they perform one final act. They go back down to the basement to check on the guards. One of the thieves asks Rick Abath, "Are you comfortable?" It's a surreal, almost polite question under the circumstances. They then go to the security office, and they take the videotapes from the VCRs, not just from the cameras that recorded their entry, but the tapes from the previous several days as well. They also take the printout from the motion detector system, believing incorrectly that they were erasing all record of their movements. At 2:45 a.m., 81 minutes after they entered, the side door on Palace Road opens and closes one last time. The 2 men and the 13 works of art dissolve into the Boston night. For the next 5 hours, the museum remained silent. Down in the basement, Rick Abath and Randy Heston were still bound and gagged. They could hear nothing. As the sun began to rise over the city, the first of the day shift guards arrived for their 8 a.m. start. They buzzed at the front door. There was no answer. They tried the intercom. Silence. Growing concerned, they called the museum's director of security, Lyle Grindle. Grindle arrived and, using his keys, finally opened the museum doors at 8:15 a.m. What they found was a scene of quiet devastation. The security desk was empty. They called out for Abath and Heston. There was no reply. As they began to search the building, the true horror of the night began to reveal itself. In the Dutch room, the empty frames on the wall screamed of violation. Sliced remnants of Rembrandt's canvases lay on the floor like discarded skins. The splintered glass of the display case glittered under the gallery lights. Police were called immediately. When they arrived, they found Abath and Heston in the basement, cold and shaken, but physically unharmed. The crime scene, however, was already compromised. In the initial confusion and shock, museum staff and police officers tramped through the galleries, their footprints mingling with whatever tracks the thieves may have left behind. the delicate work of forensic analysis was made infinitely more difficult. The FBI was called in, and one of the largest and most complex art crime investigations in history began. The initial focus, naturally, fell on the two guards. Rick Abath, in particular, came under intense scrutiny. His story had inconsistencies. His breaking of protocol by opening the door was the linchpin of the entire heist. The suspicious opening and closing of the side door an hour before the thieves arrived was a massive red flag. He was polygraphed multiple times, and while the results of polygraphs are not admissible in court, sources within the investigation have said he failed them. Was he a hapless victim, a fool who made a terrible mistake, or was he the inside man, a willing or coerced accomplice who opened the door for a cut of an unimaginable fortune? Abath maintained his innocence. He argued that he was young, intimidated, and simply followed the orders of men he believed to be police officers. He eventually moved away from Boston, attempting to leave the shadow of the heist behind him, but it has followed him his entire life. He has remained the subject of intense speculation, a central character in a story from which he can never seem to exit. As the investigation broadened, the FBI began looking outward, into the tangled, close-knit world of Boston's criminal underworld. This was, after all, Boston in the 1990s, a city where organized crime, particularly the Italian-American mafia and Irish gangs, still held significant sway. A crime of this magnitude, requiring this level of planning and audacity, seemed to point toward a professional crew. Over the years, a constellation of names has emerged from the darkness, a cast of career criminals, mobsters, and hustlers, all connected by rumor, informant testimony, and circumstantial evidence. One of the first and most compelling threads led to a crew based in Dorchester, a neighborhood of Boston, run by a mobster named Carmelo Merlino. Merlino was a veteran criminal who ran a car repair shop that doubled as a front for his illegal activities. In the years after the heist, Merlino and his associates became prime subjects of interest. One of those associates was a man named David Turner. In 1999, Turner was arrested along with Merlino in an unrelated armored car robbery sting. While in prison, informants told the FBI that Turner had been one of the two men who entered the Gardner. A witness who saw a man with a bushy mustache casing the museum in the days before the heist later picked Turner out of a photo array. Turner, a career criminal with a long rap sheet, fit the profile. He was tough, capable, and connected. Another associate, George Reisfelder, also matched the physical description of one of the thieves. Conveniently for the theory, Reisfelder died of a drug overdose in 1991, just over a year after the heist, taking any secrets he might have had to the grave. The theory went that Merlino's crew had stolen the art not for a specific buyer, but as a get-out-of-jail-free card. The plan was to use the masterpieces as bargaining chips, to trade them for leniency for themselves or their associates. In fact, after his 1999 arrest, Carmelo Merlino himself offered to help the FBI recover the art in exchange for a reduced sentence. He claimed he could get back at least one of the paintings, the Rembrandt Seascape, but his leads went cold, and his promises evaporated. He died in prison in 2005, another dead end. For years, the case seemed to languish, a collection of tantalizing rumors, but no hard evidence. No fingerprints were ever matched. The duct tape and handcuffs used on the guards were generic and untraceable. The stolen security tapes were never found. The crime was a perfect information vacuum. Then, in the early 2010s, the focus of the investigation shifted from Boston to Connecticut. The new person of interest was an aging, low-level mobster named Robert Gentile. Known as Bobby, Gentile was a member of a Philadelphia crime family operating in New England. In 2010, the widow of another mobster, Robert the Cook Guarente, told the FBI a stunning story. She claimed that before his death in 2004, her husband had been in possession of at least some of the stolen Gardner paintings. She said that he had given 2 of them to Robert Gentile for safekeeping at a meeting in Maine. This was the biggest break in the case in 2 decades. The FBI descended on Gentile's home in Manchester, Connecticut. They searched his property with ground-penetrating radar. They dug up his yard. Inside his house, they found a handwritten list of the 13 stolen artworks, along with their estimated black market values. They also found a police cap and what appeared to be police uniform patches. Gentile was an irascible, unhealthy man in his 70s. He vehemently denied everything. He claimed the list was something another man had given him, that he was just a pack rat. He claimed the uniform items were from a film set. He was put under immense pressure. He was arrested on unrelated gun and drug charges and offered a deal. Tell them where the paintings are, and he would walk free. He refused. He insisted he knew nothing. He, too, was polygraphed. According to the FBI, the test indicated a 99% probability that he was lying when he denied having prior knowledge of the heist or the whereabouts of the art. Despite the pressure, Gentile never broke. The search of his property yielded nothing. The paintings were not there, but the FBI was convinced he was a key link in the chain. They believed the art had been moved from Boston to Connecticut and then perhaps to Philadelphia, where an attempt was made to sell it in the early 2000s. The deal, they theorized, fell through and the art went back into hiding. In March 2013, on the 23rd anniversary of the heist, the FBI made a dramatic announcement. Richard Delorier, the special agent in charge of the Boston office, held a press conference. He stated for the first time publicly that the FBI knew who was responsible for the theft. He did not name them, saying the investigation was ongoing, but he confirmed they were members of a criminal organization with a base in the mid-Atlantic states and New England. The implication was clear. They were talking about the Merlino crew and their affiliates, men like David Turner and George Reisfelder. The FBI also confirmed their belief that the art was moved to Connecticut and Philadelphia in the years after the crime. They appealed to the public, saying that the thieves were now deceased, and the statute of limitations for the theft itself had long expired. They were no longer focused on prosecuting the original thieves. They were focused on recovery. The museum's standing offer of a multi-million-dollar reward, which had grown to $10 million, was reiterated. No questions asked. The announcement was a bombshell, but it led nowhere. No one came forward. No paintings surfaced. Robert Gentile died in 2021, defiant to the end. David Turner remains in prison, maintaining his silence. The trail, which had seemed so warm for a moment, went cold once again. Of course, the mob theory is not the only one. Over the decades, a cottage industry of speculation has grown around the Gardner heist. There is the theory involving Miles Connor Jr., a brilliant and notorious art thief who coincidentally was in federal prison at the time of the robbery. Connor, a rock musician like Rick Abath, had a history of stealing art to use as leverage. He had once stolen a Rembrandt from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and successfully bartered it for a reduced sentence. Some believe he may have masterminded the Gardner heist from his prison cell, using associates on the outside. Connor has always denied direct involvement, but has coyly hinted that he knows where the art might be. Another theory points to the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, suggesting the art was stolen to finance their operations. This theory gains some traction from Boston's deep Irish roots and known IRA sympathies, but there has never been any concrete evidence to support it. And then there is the most romantic and perhaps least likely theory, that the heist was commissioned by an eccentric, Doctor-style billionaire collector who keeps the masterpieces in a secret vault, to be admired only by him. While it makes for a great movie plot, the violent and destructive nature of the theft, slashing canvases, smashing cases, seems inconsistent with the delicate sensibilities of a true art connoisseur. So where does that leave us? It leaves us back in the Dutch room, standing before two empty frames. The FBI believes the paintings have not been destroyed. They believe they are still out there, perhaps hidden in an attic, a basement, or a storage locker, their immense cultural value reduced to a dangerous secret. The artworks are too famous to be sold on the open market. They are, in a sense, hostages, their value lying only in their potential for a reward or a negotiation that has never materialized. The 81 minutes the thieves spent inside the Gardner have now been stretched into more than 30 years of searching. The crime itself was a sprint. The investigation has been a marathon with no finish line in sight. It is a testament to the power of the criminal code of silence, the infamous omerta, that in a case with a $10 million reward and the promise of immunity, not one person has come forward with information that has led to the recovery of a single piece. The anatomy of this case is therefore the anatomy of a void. It is a story built around a central hollowness. Unlike a murder case, where a body provides a focal point for forensic analysis, here the evidence is the lack of evidence. The crime scene is not a bloodstain, but an empty space on a wall. The investigation has been a process of trying to reconstruct a ghost, to give shape and form to the shadows who walked through the museum that night. The heist changed everything for the world of museum security. The lax trust-based systems of the past were ripped out and replaced with fortified, technologically advanced defenses. The Gardner itself is now a fortress, but those changes came too late. They are a reaction to a wound that cannot be undone. Isabella Stewart Gardner's will stipulated that if the arrangement of her collection was ever permanently altered, the museum would be dissolved. In a strange and poetic legal interpretation, the museum's trustees have argued that because they believe the art will one day be returned, its absence is only temporary. The empty frames serve as proof of this intention. They are not acknowledgments of loss, but placeholders for a homecoming. They are an act of faith, a belief that what was taken can be restored, that the silence can one day be filled with harmony again. But as the years turn into decades, that faith is tested. The major suspects are dead. The trail is colder than it has ever been. The paintings, if they still exist, are growing older, more fragile, perhaps stored in conditions that are causing them irreparable harm. The crime is no longer just the act of theft itself, but the ongoing deprivation of these works from the public. It is a theft from all of us, every day that they remain missing. The thieves stole more than canvas and paint. They stole a piece of our shared cultural history. They created a void, and that void has taken on a life of its own, becoming as famous as the art it was meant to contain. The empty frames at the Gardner are now, in their own way, one of the museum's most compelling exhibits. They are a stark and powerful monument to the most audacious art theft the world has ever known. The thieves were in the museum for 81 minutes, but in the long, silent galleries of the Gardner, their shadow has never truly left. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.